Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Fisher. I'm the founder of Data Bindu LLC. I graduated from college in 2020 and decided that I wanted to create software and create machine learning and AI applications and sort of explore the limits of the computational space. And I'm very stubborn, so I just thought, hey, I can make a LLC, I can make a business. And I found myself on Upwork, and it's been a year now since I've started working on Upwork. And I want to review some of the lessons that I've learned from my time on Upwork. I think you'll find it maybe interesting. Who knows? But let me say Upwork right from the start. In 2020, we had the start of COVID and the lockdowns, and now gradually we are getting out of that depending on where you live. But in 2020 and at the start of 2021, as a fresh college grad and trying to have your own LLC and being under lockdown, it was very difficult to get jobs. And I had a few jobs lined up from where I was locally, but I had to go to other sources to find jobs. And one of those sources was Upwork. And it took me about probably 6 months to receive my first contract on Upwork. And Upwork is basically the wild, wild west. They're trying to not make it so, but there are so many interesting jobs on Upwork. There's people doing homework, machine learning and AI homework. There's people trying to predict the stock market. There are large enterprise grade companies looking for models on detecting skin tone from images. There are many, many more projects out there that are super interesting. And there are a lot of characters on Upwork who I've spent hours talking to, even just at my own expense. And like I said, I want to share some of those moments because it's really fascinating and amazing that in the modern era, if you're in technology, if you're working with computers or software or what have you, you're able to have an independent source of income and be your own person and kind of make your own way. And so I want to share some of the lessons I've learned and sort of tips and tricks to do that. And so I just finally did the closing stats on how my year has gone. And I'll insert sort of the headline, sort of overall stats, but I've had 9 jobs within the past year on Upwork. I think 3 of them were larger jobs, which had me working about full time, if not more than full time. And then the remaining 6 were consulting jobs where I would either look at a product and evaluate it and how well it would do in the marketplace, or to see potential improvements or potential features that could be added. And so of those 9, so all it took was 9, it was top rated in machine learning and data science, and I have a 100% success score. And so that paid the bills for last year and then this year as well. But beyond that, I want to go over the other aspect, right? Because it's not all about winning jobs on Upwork. The majority of jobs that you bid on, you're not going to win. And so I calculated the stats on it, and I found out that I turned down 49 different jobs within the past year. And those, it was due to a variety of reasons, but it could range anywhere from I'm too busy, I have enough contracts, I can't fit any more on my plate, or I didn't have the skills to do that particular contract. Or it could have just been I didn't like the person, I didn't like the client. You know, they had unrealistic expectations or wanted me to create, say, things that were not possible. Right. So one example that I found particularly interesting was there was a job post that asks for you to basically create GPT-3. For people who don't know, it's a large language model that uses basically all of the internet up until a certain year, and it would likely take probably hundreds of thousands of dollars to train, just to create the model itself, like electricity costs, compute costs, and everything else, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this particular job post wanted me to basically create GPT-3 for $10,000. So it wouldn't even cover the compute costs to do that, yet alone the time it takes to implement such a large-scale project. So that was one project that you just have to laugh, and you have to know, okay, you probably shouldn't bid on this one because it's unrealistic expectations. So like I said, I turned down about 49 different requests for proposals, right? People reaching out to me saying, hey, do you think you could work on this? And like I said, whether it was I didn't have the skills, or I was too busy, or they were bad clients, I turned them down. Now, beyond that, throughout the year, I had bid on about 59 different jobs. Okay, so this is the client posts a job, it shows up in the job feed, and everyone on Upwork can bid on that job if it's publicly listed, which it would be if it's on the job feed. And so of those 59 that I sent out, I was contacted, or at least received a message from the client 37 times of the 59. So it was about a 62% interview percentage of my proposals, which is pretty good, pretty high. And then from that, that we would do messages back and forth, or have Skype interviews to see if I was qualified or what my bid would be and so forth. And so of those 37, I actually won, like I said, 9 of the jobs. So that's about a 24% rate at which I actually won the contract, or was awarded the contract to do the work itself. And I actually think it's reasonable. But that is the message that I'm trying to tell you, is that when you're a consultant, you're not winning a high percentage of your jobs. And if you are, be very happy. But I think that at 24%, I'm able to sustain myself and keep the business running. I also have low overhead costs and expenses, but that's a totally different story. But there's a funnel to it, right? So you're going to bid on jobs. You're only going to get a small percentage of them to even get to the next stage, to even get an interview, or even have a back and forth with the client. And then you're even going to win a smaller percentage of those. And from those, that's, how much income you make from the website. And if you are a new freelancer on Upwork, you're likely not going to get that many requests for proposals. That was the 52 requests for proposals that I received within the last year, where I didn't have enough bandwidth to do it, or have the skills, or the client was terrible. And so new freelancers on Upwork will probably not get that many requests for proposals, just because usually those are the client singles you out, or the Upwork talent specialist singles you out and says, I think you'd be a good fit for this job. And so if you don't have expertise or experience or money made on Upwork, it's difficult to show up for those people to see your profile, because you are competing on a sort of a global market, right? People who are freelancers on Upwork, we're all bidding on the same jobs if they're posted. And it's a global market. You're competing with other people on the market who can do similar skills as you. And so I thought that was a good point, that if you're new to the freelancing game, it's going to take some time. You have to build up clientele, you have to build up experience and money made on the website. So I want to talk about some of the funnier experiences that I've had on Upwork. So now that I only win 24% of the contracts, right? That I can actually talk to them and discuss the project further. And so what makes up the other 66%? My math is right. So there's a variety of reasons. First, there are quite a bit of jobs on Upwork that don't hire anyone. They'll post the job, and whether they're collecting information or they didn't find the right talent or whatever, they never ultimately hire someone for that job posting. So I don't know the percentage of that, but I do see that fairly often. So that would be a large chunk of that 66% of not getting the contract. And then other areas might be I wasn't the most qualified contractor, or my bid was too high. Those are two other possibilities for not winning the contract. But again, beyond that, I want to talk about some of the funnier moments on Upwork, right? Upwork is such a interesting place because there's, like I said, there's so many characters. There's so many interesting people. Within the past year, of the people I can talk about where I'm not under an NDA, there are people who come from the telecommunications aspect or side of things, people who are in finance and are trying to create machine learning models on financial instruments. There are people in the scientific community who are looking for data sets on medical and health data, on MRIs. There are people who are trying to use GPT-3 and use it for creating articles that you can post on websites or marketing. There are people who are trying to monitor sensors for ecology models and other things like that. There are so many different applications on Upwork and so many different projects on Upwork. It's truly fascinating to see what people are using technology for nowadays. And I sort of feel hooked into the main line of what's going on because of my time spent on Upwork. Just reading the job feed, you see what people are asking for and how they're using technology. And it's sort of a firsthand insight into where we're at with our technology, where we're at with businesses looking to push technology a little bit further in their own industry. And it's really, really a breath of fresh air to see all the different applications and to see people trying to get people who have the know-how and understanding to do these things and sort of connect the desire to do the application or the code with the people who can do the code and to actually complete it. And so just my time on Upwork I've came up with a lot of different ways that you could write code and how, it keeps me on my toes, basically. It makes me always and constantly looking, okay, what could be used? What would be relevant here? When you're consulting with a company and they're giving you an idea and you're tasked with converting it into code or converting it into an applicable framework or existing software that's out there, I mean, it's exhilarating, and of course this is what I do for a living, right? But I very much enjoy it, and it keeps me on my toes. I have to always be evolving my skills and learning new things. And if that interests you, I implore you to get into consulting, even if it is just on your free time. Say you have a normal job, but at night you want to have some cool projects that you could work on, check out Upwork. It's all out there. So anyway, story time. I'll go over a story. I know I've been delaying here. Let's see. One of my favorite and more interesting consultations was with someone who was trying to create a family of artificial intelligence robots. And I can't make this stuff up. This stuff would be too weird to make up. And so usually people on Upwork, their project descriptions are sometimes they're too short. Other times they provide good details, but more often than not, they're no more than, say, 5 paragraphs, right? Anything beyond 5 paragraphs is very bizarre. Unless it's an extremely technical and in-depth project and the client is really good about providing all the necessary details. But that's very infrequent that would occur. So this particular project, the person had 7-8 paragraphs And it was very, very interesting and sort of bizarre details where they were talking about Ray Kurzweil and his prediction on the technological singularity in 2029, and Elon Musk trying to create humanoid robots in 2023, which we're not there at all. But this client was relatively informed on AI and machine learning, and he wanted to build a family of robots to be his own family and be sociable with. And he wanted to have these robots as griffins, werewolves, and other legendary beings, right? So he wanted their AI models or their language models to be based on mythological creatures, which I thought was very interesting and very fun. And he wanted to know when in the future this would be possible, and if it would be possible to do that, right? To create a robot and have a large language model within the robotic agent, and then like how much it would be and who would be able to sell that to him. And so I provided a few robot manufacturers to him, and we had discussed these large language models that have recently came out, like GPT-3, and it was a very interesting conversation because it ultimately devolved into us talking about social and political norms in Portugal and just a myriad of things where, I'm an hour and a half in and I'm wondering, like, what am I doing here? But this is awesome, because it was just like a very authentic and genuine conversation, and I very much enjoyed it. Didn't get paid to do it. It was totally fine. I had no other appointments at the end of the day, and I absolutely loved it. And it was very fun to talk about how someone who is outside of the machine learning and AI realm could see the use of these things and was wondering, hey, how do I get involved in this? How can I get, a robotic family? How can I talk to chimeras and griffins and werewolves in a robotic form? Like, is that possible? How would I do that? And so that was one of my more fun client meetings. And then there's also been more informative consultations where, for one example, there was someone who was involved with internet traffic, and they had their own switches, network switches. And basically that client was wondering if analysis could be done on who is using the switches and the completion rate of making a phone call. So when you call, you're using usually rented, you pay for this switch network to get the phone call to the other end of whoever you're dialing. And he was discussing the many applications of how there are some people who cheat the switching network and they connect the phone call to anyone rather than the person you actually dialed. And if you force it to connect, then whoever owns that switch gets paid for that connection because you're using their resources. And I'm summarizing greatly, so forgive me, but that's the gist of it without having to go into the techniques of it. So this client was wondering if analysis could be done to detect these sort of fraud-like events from happening, and then also detect the utilization of the switches, and if you could dynamically price the switch price of, if your switch is used in the completion of the phone call or of the packets being transferred, how much would that be? And if that you could use analytics to discover that and find that. It was a very, very interesting conversation. And we probably discussed that for probably 2 hours. Again, free. So maybe this is part of the me not capitalizing on some of these things. But again, I very much enjoy this field, and if it leads to a potential contract, I'm more than willing to hear about and provide a consultation on what's possible with your own data or your own process. So that was another interesting one. Let's go. I think there's more. talked about applications of AI in the insurance field, how you would get certain data, how you could use that data for predicting insurance claims. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of people who want to do the, make me an algorithm that can predict the future. And they're like, how much will this cost? It's like, you don't think that if someone could do this accurately, they would just apply it themselves? And, I'll preface this by saying it is possible to do that, to predict the stock market. I don't think it's single investors. Like, those are people who have invested in the algorithms, in the compute, in the infrastructure, and they're probably doing some trading scheme to basically leverage volatility or variance, and they're ingesting gigs of data, right? These are not small time players. These would, be the hedge funds. These would be people who are sort of really have the overhead and compute required to do that. It's not just a single person. Hey, can you make me a model which will predict the future for 20 grand? It's like, yeah, probably not. It probably won't work that way. And I've had past clients where, I apply a model and we see how well it can do on predicting a certain asset, and some of the more bare bones models, that they are terrible, right? If you're just doing a time series based model, which probably should not be done, I told this particular client that you would need a deep learning approach. You would need, like, the traditional time series models, they can't even include features, right? It's just based on the signal alone. Now I'm delving into the statistical analysis of time series models a little bit too much, but you need some of the more recent model advances to predict assets, because the old sort of statistical time series models don't even work. And I had used Facebook's profit model, which is, includes some of the, probably, I think it normalizes for seasonality and other things. But the point being is that it wasn't up to the challenge of predicting this particular asset. There's a lot of cases on Upwork where, rightfully so, the client doesn't necessarily know what they want. And that's why they're coming to you as the consultant. And it's usually your job to figure out what they want and try to relay that to them, where they may say, hey, I need a machine learning model for this. And it's really like, oh, well, actually you just need like simple analytics on it. And then, it's not like they're coming in there thinking like, I need AGI, I need artificial general intelligence. It's like, okay, we don't have that yet. Or maybe the NSA does, I don't know, or OpenAI, I don't know. But you definitely don't need that, right? Like, this is a very particular domain. So usually it's the analyst's job or the consultant's job to tease through what they want, right? So while they're providing the details of the project, you have to, decipher, okay, this is what they actually want, right? So how you get to that is usually by asking questions. Like, how are you going to interface with the software that I write? Ideally, how would you like to use this software? Like, what does it get, describe to me how you imagine this thing working. And so through those questions, you get a sense of what they're looking for. And oftentimes, more than not, it's not what they've stated in their proposal, in their job proposal or job posting. I hope you learned something from this video, and talk to you later.